Welcome to Beyond the Game, More Stories, the podcast where we explore the lessons sports teach us about life, leadership, adversity, and just growth long after the final whistle blows. I'm your host, Dwayne Lightfoot Jr. On this show, we sit down with athletes, coaches, parents, and leaders just to have real conversations about the moments that shape us, the different challenges, the victories, the big ones, the small ones, the setbacks that we go through, and ultimately the experiences that stay with us long after the scoreboard goes dark. So, all right, let's jump into today's episode of Beyond the Game, More Stories. Today's guest is someone who spent decades shaping the basketball culture in the city of Louisville, not just through wins and championships, but through the lives he's impacted along the way, mine personally being one of them. Getting his start as the team manager at the University of Kentucky under legendary coaches like Eddie Sutton and Rick Pitino, he is a longtime high school basketball coach in Louisville, Kentucky. One of his best-known stops were the success he had at my personal high school of Jeffersontown High School, where he built their program into one of the most respected programs in the state. During his tenure there at J-Town, he led the charges to the mountaintop. They were the 2006 Kentucky High School Boys Sweet 16 state champions, bringing home the school's first boys basketball state title. That championship run cemented Jeffersontown's place in the state's rich basketball history and just showcased the culture of discipline, teamwork, and toughness that's defined his teams. But his impact goes far beyond just a single championship season. Across his years on the sidelines, he's built programs known for player development and preparation while consistently competing at the highest level. In 2023, he was named the head coach of the Kentucky Junior All-Stars and followed that in 2024 being appointed as the head coach of the Kentucky Senior All-Stars, leading both teams to victory over Indiana. Today, he serves as the head coach of Louisville Eastern High School, where in his first season, he guided the team to a regional tournament appearance. With over 30 years of head coaching experience, he reached a major milestone in 2025 by earning his 500th career victory. Through his career, he's helped hundreds of athletes, including myself, successfully transition from the high school level to college basketball, preparing them in a way few coaches have done. So from building championship teams to mentoring countless young athletes, he has left a lasting impact on Louisville basketball. And it's just a reminder that the greatest legacy of a coach is the people that they help along the way. So please help me welcome Coach Jeff Morrow to Beyond the Game, More Stories. Coach, good afternoon. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Appreciate you having me. Looking forward to it, and always good to catch up with a former player.
Yeah, no, I definitely appreciate you doing it. You know, I know our paths crossed back 26, 27 years ago. So I know with your busy schedule, everything ready for the off season for your team, I appreciate you making the time. I did see, so I want to congratulate you again and give you your flowers. The team celebrated the 20th anniversary of the state title. So congratulations on that. Amazing experience. I got to sit there and watch it. Walked back into the locker room with you guys for a quick second, and I just really, really honored and humbled to see everything that you've been able to bring to just high school basketball as a whole, but everything that you've helped me with and taught me, even though I was a stubborn, hard-headed kid in the very beginning.
Well, I appreciate that. Last night was fun. Some of those guys I've seen, regularly over the years, and then there's a few that have gone to other states and different things, and so. It was really cool experience to be with them last night.
Yeah, and that's something that you guys will always share and have. When that banner is there, those pictures, and those memories, everything that y'all have from that is just an incredible, amazing thing. So, and I always remember when you first came in, you had your Kentucky ring that you would always wear, and I swore to myself I was going to get one of my own, but I'm hoping that UK ring has been replaced by the J-Town one by now.
It has. It has.
All righty, good. All right, so now before we kind of get into all the different accomplishments and everything, because I know there's tons of them. A lot of people just kind of see on the surface, the things that they see from the stands and watching you on the sidelines. But I like to kind of always start at this spot because on the podcast we focus more on the person, not just the athlete or the coach. So I want to like set the table. So for everybody listening who may only know you from your resume or the introduction that I just gave you, or just some of the names of the players you coached in your career, what is something that they don't know about what it took to get you here today?
Well, off the top of my head, I'd probably say, early at the beginning of my career, honestly, I thought I was going to be a college coach. And so, looking back 30 years ago, that was a difficult fork in the road that I had to make a decision on. And at the time, I really just felt pulled to the high school game. I had spent time at college and saw it firsthand at the highest level, but really just felt like I could have a bigger impact with high school kids. And so, now 30 years fast forward, I feel like probably made the right decision. And, you always wonder, what if you'd done that? What if you'd have done this? But I've enjoyed it. And so I think it's been a very positive ride for me. Quite honestly, I'm still single, and I've devoted a good portion of my time is basketball. I think the reason that I have probably stayed single all these years is was too dedicated to basketball. So, but nonetheless, I wouldn't trade it. I have thoroughly enjoyed and still thoroughly enjoy what I do.
Yeah, no, and again, and I hope that you've only had one me and you haven't had any others. But again, the impact that you've had on just a lot of kids, man. I still talk to some of those guys. I talked to Rashad Basie. We check in with each other a couple of times. I talked to several of just the other kids that a few of my teammates from that time. And in the beginning we didn't really understand the vision and everything, but I would not with any doubt in my mind say that you were the right person to come into that program in 1999 and do that. So I'm happy that you didn't go the college route, which is something that I do want to talk to you about, because I've always wondered that, because I know I don't believe that it would be because of lack of opportunity. Especially after the 2006 year, that there was plenty of colleges and even pro programs would love to have a mind like yours. Because I've always said, I played for several coaches in my career, but I would say the two coaches in my entire career that I say just X and O's, just know basketball the most, would be a guy named Brad Stevens and you. And just seeing some of the in-game adjustments that we made even in that one year. But, so again, I know, I personally believe you could have gone, as high a level as you wanted to with it. But again, so for the sake of my career, for the sake of, the 2006 guys and 2008 guys and everybody else, your kids now at Eastern, the lives you touched at Iroquois, and even going all the way back to Whitfield and Ballard, we all appreciate, the fact that you stayed at this level for us.
Thank you.
All righty. So, we'll hop in here to just kind of the meat and potatoes. I have to ask the question that everybody's wondering. Everybody wants to know, how lucky did you feel to get to coach me, and what exactly, did you like about that? I'm totally kidding. No, nobody wants to know that. So no, but again, your journey with basketball has taken you through a lot of different roles. Again, you started as a team manager, you went through, graduate assistant under great coaches, and even in the situation that you were in there, you were around a bunch of other legendary coaches, the Tubby Smiths and the Eddie Suttons and the Herb Sendeks and Billy Donovans. What are some of the lessons that you learned from working with those kind of coaches that you still carry with you into your coaching style now?
Well, I think anybody that is connected to Coach Pitino coaching tree is going to have a similar response to that. And when you look at his coaching tree, it is second to none, and at all levels. He's got guys that have won NBA championship that work for him. He's got guys that have won college championships that have worked for him. He has guys that have won high school championships that have worked for him. So I think the lesson that all of us took from him that I still use, and I know just listening to him here recently this year in his tournament, that they are still every much doing now as he did 30 years ago, which is preparation. Some coaches have the philosophy of we just do us. We don't worry what the other team's going to do. But one of Coach Pitino's secrets to success, if you will, is his enormous amount of preparation. And I'm sure you recall scouting reports and trying to stop other teams' out of bounds plays. And every job that I've taken over, it seems like that is a foreign concept to, especially when you're dealing with teenagers, something that they just are not used to doing. But and each year we've gotten a little bit better at it. But certainly, from Coach Pitino, that jumps out right off the top of my head. I mean, obviously, I learned a million things from him that I still use today. A lot of my philosophy of how we do things is shaped from him. But I think the one simple answer is just the way that he prepares his teams. And so we've tried to emulate that over the years. It's challenging, like when you're in the SEC tournament or the NCAA tournament and you don't have a lot of preparation time, then you're playing, with one day in between. And so in high school, often you're playing with no days in between, a Friday, Saturday, or a Christmas tournament. So it's challenging, but I think back to the state championship team, even having to play those two games in one day. We went to a ballroom in the hotel there that we were staying at after the first morning game, and we put down tape on the floor and just walked through. So preparation is what I would take from Coach Pitino. And those other guys, I think Billy Donovan really changed the college game when he was at Florida with the pick and roll and how he the options that he utilized off the pick and roll. So everybody that is a coach that you're around, you take a little piece of something from all of them. But all of us, all those names you mentioned, are all directly connected to Coach Pitino, who, in my opinion, is the best to ever do it.
Yeah, and I will say, I think you've had several players that have gotten into coaching, post high school or post college. I know you've worked with Nick, you've worked with Brandon, several other guys have gotten into coaching, and like I said, you know that I've gotten into coaching, and a lot of what I do is come from some of the lessons that I've learned from you. And then when you talk about the preparation, you were the first coach where, like I said in my introduction, you're preparing these guys for the next level. So as I was getting into, working with you, I didn't understand that at first, but it took me to getting into college when I started to see those things like film edit, like pregame meals, like your index card that had the entire practice written down to the minute. When I saw my college coach do it, I was like, man, Coach Morrow was either was like was from the future or something, because he was running his program in a way that helped prepare us for that. And you said some of the programs that you come to, it's a foreign concept. Especially in my time when I was coming through, most programs had three coaches. You had your varsity coach, your JV coach, and your freshman coach. When you came in there, you had basically a 1-to-1 ratio. It was almost one coach for every player we had. And that gave the opportunity to prepare. So, you would have one coach who's the nice. Tandy was always the nice guy. Him and Brian Terry were always the nice guy. We had Coach Summers, who was the mean guy. Then you had Wes, who was the nice guy. Coach Bonnell was there. Charlo was there. We literally, and it was a testament to you, that because a lot of those guys, weren't getting paid. They were coming there doing it because they enjoyed being around the game and they believed in what you were doing. And like you say, that's not everywhere. That is something that really helped me in my transition as I went to the next level, because I did feel like I was prepared. And again, after I eventually bought into what you were doing, I do see that preparation being something that you try to instill in the program, and that a lot of us got from that. So, that is something that I would definitely agree. And Coach Pacino is one of one.
No doubt. No doubt.
Yeah. All righty. So I'm gonna take it back a little bit. 'Cause like I said, you've been fortunate enough to coach at several other program. Several schools were like, "Hey, man, this is the guy. This is the guy that is going to be able to take our program to the next level." So I want to rewind back to the very first time that you and I shared a court together, right? And that was my sophomore year when you were at Ballard. And that night, I quickly learned how demanding you were of your players, and it was not a bad thing. You set a standard, and that standard was non-negotiable. And I also learned that, and you're a very vocal coach, which at that point in time in my life I hadn't had. There was something scary being, we're 2 and about 18, and we're coming in, and you got guys having dunk contests and warm-ups that have actually bought into that. And there are some kids and parents nowadays that don't want their kids to have that vocal of a presence around their kids, and that's something that I've dealt with around it, because like I said, I take a lot of how I operate and work with kids is from people like you. you know how do you work with players who struggle to understand the difference between being yelled at and being coached?
Well, I think it has always been a challenge. I think in like your age, guys back then, guys from last night that we saw. I mean, I can't tell you how many of them said last night, kind of similar to what you have just summarized here, in that we had no idea what you were doing. We didn't understand it. We couldn't figure it out. And now as grown adults, we do understand it. But society has changed, and I think as a coach, not to say that I don't yell or not to say that I don't coach hard, but I think coaches at all levels have adapted. It's kind of ironic to have that question, because in the NCAA tournament, I've seen people criticizing Tom Izzo, I've seen people criticizing Rick Pitino, I've seen people criticizing other college coaches that are ultra successful for being too hard or too loud. And ultimately, not that anyone of merit is saying that. It's just some random person on social media. But I think it's a reflection of society. I think the key is, and I think the longer I have coached, I have gotten much better at it, developing relationships in the beginning. And so, like for example, at Eastern now, I got hired about a year ago, last April. And so I really had a long time to develop specific individual relationships with those guys. When I recall, at J-Town, I didn't get the job quite as early, and I was a lot younger, so probably did not understand the importance of that relationship piece. Not that it wasn't there, but I didn't make it a priority probably as much as I should have. And so I feel like, the old saying, they don't care what you know until they know you care. And so I think that's the way that you have to approach it. I think, the very first meeting we had at Eastern, I explained, I'm going to coach you hard, and that it's not going to be personal. But it was probably well into last summer before I began that, because I felt like I needed to get to know who they were, both as people and as players. And so there's always going to be a parent that doesn't like it. There's going to be some kids that struggle with it, and I think you have to adjust and adapt. And I think there's some kids that are just not going to be able to take it. So you have to, as a coach, recognize that. Coach Pitino would often be mad at one player, and I won't embarrass them by using their names, but he would be mad at a player, but he would yell at a different player because he knew that player that he was upset with couldn't necessarily handle it. But I think as long as players know that you are there for them and care about them. And I think the other thing that's probably helped me over the years is my longevity, and the fact that if this dude didn't want to be a high school coach, if he wasn't here for the right reasons, he wouldn't have lasted for 30 years. So I think that leads some credibility to who you are. But in the heat of the moment, players are not going to like it. But I think what they've got to understand as best they can at a young age is that it's not the tone, or it's the message. And all those guys I mentioned at the beginning, Pitino, Izzo, like, you can't argue with their success. And even Izzo and Pitino in their 70s are still at the top of their game. And so I think I think there is a time and a place for that, but there's also a time and a place to, to put your arm around somebody and let them know that you care about them and that you're there for them.
And I agree with that. And I know kind of the way that our relationship started out. You came in my junior year, and we didn't have that chance to build a relationship. And a lot of that, and I'll apologize to you, a lot of that was on me. I was, again, an immature 16, 17-year-old kid who only had one coach that I knew. And you were coming around, that's it's kind of the direction I want to head next. You came into J-Town after building this amazing team at Ballard that a lot of people just felt was a year away, and just but as you came, you're looking for your next stop, and you chose J-Town, which the job wasn't really open at that point in time. Coach McPherson was still there, and you spent that year again building those relationships. You were helping out with Coach Edwards, offering help. One thing I always remember was every time I looked up, somehow you were filling up a vending machine. I don't know when you ever taught, but I feel like there was a lot of vending machines being filled up during the day. Um, but as you kind of come through that, we didn't build that relationship in that year that we had, or even really, that summer that we had before when you had us in the gym. But as you took the teaching job there, like I said, for that full year, what drew you to that opportunity when the job came open, and what gave you the confidence that you were the right coach to take on a project like J-Town? Because J-Town was 4-24 the year before.
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple things. I had good relationships with you mentioned Coach Edwards and also Mr. Perkins, the principal. I always felt like J-Town was a school that lost a lot of players, not just players, students in general, but students and players to other schools. And from a geographical standpoint, the area that J-Town served, I felt like it was an area that was kind of under tapped, and I felt like it was an area that if you could just get those kids and those families and those parents to not look elsewhere, to not look, which is something that you did. And I know your story long before I got there, but I know that when you were choosing a high school, you had multiple options, but you grew up a J-Town kid. You lived in the area, you lived in the neighborhood, and so that was kind of my thought process, that it was a sleeping giant in terms of you've got to be able to put a product out there to where the players and the parents and the people are going to want to send their kid to J-Town. And I think over time we were able to accomplish that. I think on the state championship team, I think we dressed 15 in the state tournament, and 14 of them lived within the J-Town resides area, meaning that's the school that they were assigned to go to. So I think, it took some time, but that was kind of my thought process. And I've often said over my career, who you're working with and who you're working for really matter. And I think there has to be a level of trust. And so the opportunity to go somewhere where I knew some people, and like you said, there was no pre-discussion of me getting that job when I took the teaching job there, and there was no guarantee that the coaching job was going to be open. Coach McPherson could have stayed another few years. He obviously moved into becoming a counselor, but there was no, he's going to be moving on, or so. I kind of went there hoping that it might develop, and I felt like if I was there a year in the building and got to further know people, that maybe I'd have a inside track, if you will. But definitely no guarantee. But I always felt like J-Town was an opportunity that just needed to be, where the resources needed to be tapped into.
And I really, I never thought about it in that sense, but now that I'm looking back on it, I see that. My specific neighborhood, and I was roughly 7 minutes from the school, but in my specific neighborhood, I had two guys went to Fern Creek, one guy went to Seneca, somebody went to Eastern, somebody went to Manual. I had another guy went to Cal, and then there was one. I can't remember where he went. There was one 6'9" eighth grader that came out of Newburgh Middle School that up until the day before school started that year, he's telling me, "Yeah, I'm coming to J-Town with you." And I get to school the very first day, and he's nowhere to be seen. Then I found out that he was over at Ballard. But yeah, like I said, and these are the kids that I grew up with. You know, we all played basketball, football, everything together in the neighborhood. And you know, again, a lot of them were very high level athletes at the schools that they went to. That, you know, had we all kind of gone to the same school, you know, we probably could have had something special back then. So again, I never thought about it like that. But yeah, J-Town was we had the rec league there, so a lot of kids came through that area, and just a lot of basketball was played there. But like you said, all of those kids went. Matter of fact, we had even had 4 kids went to Mayo. So in my neighborhood alone, we probably had 10 different high schools represented. And again, we're 7 minutes from J-Town High School.
Right.
Yeah. So it's just crazy to see that. But again, you know, I'm glad it all worked out the way it did. And you know, I look back on it, and I know that I chose the right school for me. And that was what gave me the confidence to continue to go in there. And again, like I said, I'm happy that you took the opportunity and you saw that as a potential, you know. And again, we are here today because of that. So as we talk about just kind of the relationship that we were able to form, and just some of the things that we were able to achieve, we didn't achieve our ultimate goal, which was at least the regional championship game. And you know, and I take a lot of that on me. That's something I've carried with me for 25, 26 years now. I didn't have the best performance in that, and your halftime speech has stuck with me, right? So, you know, you said, "How are we gonna win?" We're sitting in the locker room at Seneca High School. How are we gonna win? And I got my player of the year, all state player, and he's pump faking for. And you named one of the players on the manual team who was like maybe the fourth or fifth best player. I don't know if you remember that speech, but it really stuck with me, you know. But so as I kind of look back to just kind of our time together, you know, I think back to just some of the lessons that you taught us, and one of the ones that stick out to me was probably one of the hardest ones for me. Not the hardest, but one of the hardest. And it was at the end of every practice, you made us make 10 straight free throws. And there were many a times I got to 9 and missed. And in that moment, I would look around and kind of see if anybody saw, and because I was going to try to sneak out of there with just 9. But you know, but that was something, as I look back on that, you know, and I realized it was something that was more, it was about more than just the shooting. You know, you were preparing us to shoot free throws at the end of the game because we're tired at the end of practice after you had us go through a full practice. But we were also developing consistency, mental toughness, and just, you know, responsibility for yourself. So where did that idea of, you know, shooting those free throws at the end of practice come from?
Well, again, actually, another Coach Pitino deal. So when I was a manager at Kentucky, we started that. I don't know if it was his first year, but it was shortly, if not his first year, his second year, we started that. And on that particular team, we had some guys that really struggled at the free throw line. And so we had 7, 8 student managers, and at the end of practice, it was our job to rebound for them. And of course, when we finished in the evening, most nights that meant that you were going to go to dinner, and then after dinner you were going to, you know, if you had homework, study hall, whatever. Well, if you were a manager and you got stuck on the wrong basket, your dinner was probably going to be at 9 o'clock instead of 6:30. So managers would fight each other over who they didn't want to rebound for, because they knew, you knew two things. One, some guys were going to be there a while, and two, there was no chance that you better let somebody out of there without doing what they said to do. The coaches would leave. And, you know, it was a trust in us. And, you know, of course the players would, "Oh, come on, you know, I had 8, but you just knew that if you gave in to one of those guys, and that he was going to find out about it. So, you know, honestly, I thought about it for a little bit before we started doing it at J-Town, and I said to myself, I wonder at the high school level, I wonder how, you know, probable is this? In other words, how many guys can do it? And there were some that struggled, but I think I do agree 100% that it developed. In addition to improving free throw shooting, it developed mental toughness. I remember one specific evening. We had a player that Charlie was actually rebounding for, and this was after you were gone. And we were going to go. We finished practice, and one of our opponents they were playing at 7:30, and so several of the coaches had planned to go scout, and I was going to run an errand or something before I went to the gym. So Charlie was rebounding, and I told Charlie, I'll just meet you over there at the game. And Charlie loved to scout. If you know anybody that knows Charlie knows that was one of the things he enjoyed going to any basketball game. Didn't matter whether it was fifth grade, third grade, high school, college. So I get to the gym, and Charlie's not there. And this was kind of before cell phones. Certainly, he didn't have a cell phone at this point. So, I began to get a little bit concerned because that was very, very unlike Charlie to not be there well before tip-off so he could write down everybody that's in the book. And anyway, long story short, he comes in probably either right at tip-off or right after tip-off and comes up. And I said, Charlie, the thought never occurred to me that he had been rebounding free throws that long. But he had actually been at the gym, and whatever player it took them that long to make the 10 free throws. But Charlie was not – he was like the student manager in Kentucky. He wasn't giving in. And I think he said something like, Coach, I didn't know if I was going to have to spend the night or not. But anyway – it was something that we did at Kentucky, and we carried it over to J-Town, and it definitely made a difference for us.
Yeah, no, and I vividly remember just walking into games, even after I was done playing, walking into games and seeing Charlie sitting at the top row with his notepad. Charlie Hayden was one of one as well. So now let me ask you this then, follow-up question. When you were the student manager, was there ever any night that you actually, again, I know you're a trustworthy guy, so I know what your answer is going to be, but was there ever any night that you gave in to anybody?
No, and the simple answer is I don't say the word fear in a bad way. Respect, but you just we're not going to put yourself in a potential situation to where you were going to give Coach Pitino a reason to be mad at you or disappointed in you. So, honestly, some of the players would get very, very upset with you. But, you had to make a choice. Did you want a 20-year-old being upset at you, or did you want the coach at arguably the best college program in history being upset at you? So, we always erred on the side of caution, and that was to make sure Coach Pitino was happy with us.
Yeah. So now, a little birdie, not going to tell you his name, told me that there is a story behind how you developed a nickname. You remember the nickname?
Yeah, I think I know where you're going.
Am I allowed to ask this story?
Sure.
Or am I going to get him in trouble?
No,
All right.
no. He still calls me that. If it's where I think you're headed, that's how he addresses me today at age 55. So yeah.
He told me you earned the nickname of Magic.
That is correct. So Coach Pitino, back then, he was in his 30s, and so he still played actively. And so every morning, early morning, there were pickup games, 5-on-5 pickup games for the staff. They didn't have enough coaches to make 5-on-5, so the managers were forced to play. When I say play, basically what it consisted of was Billy on one team, Coach on the other team, and basically the two of them played one-on-one, and the other 8 played people out there just kind of guarded each other. But occasionally one of us would touch the ball, and I was on Coach's team that day, which Billy was never going to holler at you. Coach was going to get at. If your man scored, you're going to get yelled at. If you turned it over, you're going to get yelled. So we were on a fast break, and I tried to throw a behind-the-back pass, kind of like a Dwayne Lightfoot pass back in the day. I tried to throw a behind-the-back pass to Coach, and it didn't get there. It kind of went out of bounds, and he referred to me as Magic. Thought I was Magic Johnson, and that name stuck. And Like I said today, if he sees me, the first thing out of his mouth is going to be, "How you doing, Magic?"
See? So again, so you should have understand why I was throwing these passes. You know, Charlie was one of the ones that hated my behind the
Oh
back.
yes, yes, he did. He certainly did.
Yeah, but again, I regret it. We only had 1 year together, and that I wasted the beginning portion of it. You know, you specifically, but also the other coaches. You know, held me accountable in ways that nobody else at that point in my career had. You know, a lot of times I got by because I was, one of the most talented kids out there. But in those moments, and I'll never forget it. The only time I've ever been kicked out of practice, you kicked me out of practice, and I don't know if you've gotten that far in the book. That was a big moment for me. You challenged me to stop focusing on myself and to understand that this is about the team. So as you kind of go through that, why is that mindset of putting the team first so important for a coach when you're trying to build a lasting culture like the one that you built at J Town?
Well, without it, you're going to have zero success. Your program can't be built on the success of one player or a couple players. Obviously, starting with you, who was there when I took over, and then you had this long line of really good, talented players that came through there over the next 12 years. But if the team is not put first, and I mean it's kind of a common sense lesson, but at the same time it's not common sense because it goes against everything that society teaches you. It goes against everything that in today's game AAU culture teaches you. How many points do I score? How many Instagram likes do I have? That type thing. So it's even tougher in this world, and I don't think it's an intentional selfishness, but I think human nature, is all of us as humans. We are born selfishly, and so I think it is one of the biggest challenges that a coach has is to being able to blend players together, and so without that, it doesn't take away, and I think that's the thing that so many people miss out on. It doesn't take away from the individual's talent, and it doesn't take away from the individual's ability. And anybody who is evaluating them so for example, at the college level, understands that, sees that, knows that, and that's who they want. It's the common person, sitting in the stands, or today it's the run of the mill, social media guy who is saying so and so's not getting enough touches, or he's not getting enough shots, or he needs to do this. But you have to be able to convince everybody that when it's there for you, then when you're able to score, you got to score. But at the same time, you got to be able to get your teammates involved. And I think the greatest sign of a player is not their individual ability, but what they bring out in other people. And so when you're a very talented, high level player, everybody in the gym, everybody that watches you on film knows that you can play. But I didn't have this motto back when I was coaching you, but one of the things that I have adopted and we have used every stop I've been, probably maybe late in my J-Town tenure, is great teams have great teammates. And if I'm not mistaken, I think I got that from Butler. I think I saw that from, and I don't know which coach at Butler it would have been. It might have been Brad Stevens, but I saw that and I loved it. And we have a sign in our locker room at Eastern right now because great individuals don't make a great team, but great teammates do make a great team.
Yeah, that's a Bradism. Brad is that's one of the things that Brad used to say. So, but like I said, you've developed that culture, and it started for me. Like I said, the way that you held me accountable, prepared me for that next level. Like I still remember, and it's stories I tell my kids. Is like we talked about how many different alternatives these kids have these days. You talked about their social media, and I was talking to another one of your former players, Thomas Jackson, and we were talking about as he was working with his podcast, we were talking about how kids are they're going through, because nowadays they have Huddle and you can see everything, every play that they do at Baller TV. But they'll go through their film, and instead of watching film like the way that you taught us, the edits that you would pull out, they're going through to look for their highlights. They're fast forwarding immediately to that spot, and I'm guilty of it. I did it when I was a kid too. But again, they're finding that one dunk they had, and then they're putting it on social media, not following that by saying, "Hey, but we still lost by 30." Not saying, "Hey, my man had 20," but it's here's my one dunk, and I appreciate the level of accountability that you taught me, to the extent of, and I don't know if you remember this, my senior prom, you were a chaperone, and the very next morning I had Kentucky All-Star tryouts, which I I didn't know how important that was to me until you got there, and you created this thing where we're going to retire your jersey if you make the Kentucky All-Star. So during my senior year, you did the very first one. You hung up Maria, you hung up Shantae, you hung up Elande, you hung up Ziegler, and all of them. And I was like, I want my jersey to be up there. So as I'm walking through prom, I every time it seems like you were by that punch bowl. Every time I looked up, you were there, and you just kept looking at me and then pointing to your watch and telling me that it was time to go. Because I had to drive that next morning about 2 hours to get to the tryout. And without that, I don't know how long I would have stayed, but I left my prom at 10 o'clock, where a lot of these kids, they're choosing these other alternatives over their work or their practice, and it's just I'm eternally grateful for that accountability that you taught me in that moment, and in that whole year. So, but like we said, you guys won 2006 state championship. I want to rewind it back a little bit to the year before. Tough year, you're sitting there 2005. You're at
Louisville
Louisville
Gardens.
Gardens. You're at Louisville Gardens, and I think you were playing Trinity.
Ballard.
And it was Ballard.
Yeah.
Oh,
In the final, it
Corey.
was Ballard.
Yeah, yeah. One of your players gets fouled with no time on the clock to go to the line, and to win the regional championship, to go to the state. It didn't end up going the way that we wanted it to after that game. But in those moments after a tough loss, when emotions are high, again, I've said you're the vocal leader of that program. What's something that you try to communicate to those guys to help them grow from that experience?
Well, looking back in 30 years, I mean, that's definitely in the top two or three losses, that stung and that you carry with you and you couldn't get rid of. Some crazy things happened there on those free throws. Corey made the first one, and kind of unbelievably, the referees mistakenly, I guess, looked at the scoreboard and thought that by him making that first one that the game was over and that we had won. And all three referees sprinted off the court. And I remember it like it was yesterday. Everyone was, we didn't know what was going on. It's just not something you see. And so it took probably a good 90 seconds to 2 minutes before somebody could chase them down and get them back out on the court for him to shoot that second free throw. And I think I beat myself up because I was so focused on where are they going, when are they coming back, that I never even looked at Corey. And when they got back out on the floor, I realized that Corey had never left the line. He had stood on that free throw line the entire 90 seconds. And I wish that I would have paid more attention to him than them, and kind of gotten him off that line and just kind of gotten him over in front of the bench and just to help him relax a little bit. But nonetheless, it was we had Mr. Basketball that year, and he was graduating. In addition, not only did he graduate, but we had 3 or 4 other starters that also graduated that year. So from the outside looking in, I vividly remember, the following year is the year we won the state tournament, and we were picked 7th in the region in the preseason poll, and we had won the King of the Bluegrass tournament that year. And typically, when you win the King of the Bluegrass, they always invite you back to defend your championship if you want to come back. And we were told that we lost too much off of our team, and they didn't think we would be competitive. And so they didn't invite us back to the King of Bluegrass that following year. So I don't know that I said anything profound in the locker room in that moment. It was an early Saturday game at Louisville Gardens, and I remember just being in a daze, for a good portion of that day and the next day. When we got back to school on Monday, we had a meeting after school, and the whole thing that we had always kind of talked about with the mental toughness aspect was just being resilient, playing the next play. Can't control everything. Some things are out of our control, and we really just tried to just hammer that point home. And I think that weekend I had to get myself back to normal so that I could stand in front of them on Monday and let the ones that were returning know that it was going to be okay, and that we had been there, and that was our expectation, to not only get there but to go further. And I think also the team that ended up winning the state tournament that year, I think a real boost to us was we beat them twice. Even though we didn't get to the state tournament and they got out of a region that wasn't necessarily as tough, we had beaten them twice during the regular season. So I think at that point our players realized that we did belong and that we could compete on a statewide level. And so, we just went. Of course, we had guys that had been in the program for several years. I mean, after we took our, normal week and a half, 2 weeks off, I mean, we went right back and did everything that we had always done before. And I think the consistency and just the the belief of, hey, you just got to come back and do it again, and you got to work, and it I think it motivates you, and I think it definitely motivated that bunch, as well as the fact that everyone just counted them out, because everyone said, well, you lost all these players, you're just not going to be any good. What they didn't realize was sitting behind those guys were really talented players. They just didn't play because the guys in front of them were seniors and they were really good. So, I think how you react in the moment. I think just being there for your guys when they're upset like that. The disappointing thing is those 4 seniors that didn't get a chance to go back and do it next year, because they had, from where they started and where they finished, was just everybody, including your group from year one, built that program into 6 years later where we got it. But people forget about the foundation and the building blocks that were laid. And sometimes in sports, and sometimes you have to experience losing to understand what it takes to get over the hump. And so that was a message we tried to portray, and fortunately it was successful for us.
And that's something that I really harp on is, there is a value in losing. You can learn from that as well. I was actually speaking to the high school that I'm working with last week, and I basically said that same message. I said, I went in, I said, you got a new coaching staff. He's going into year 2. I've only been here for, about a month and a half, and we're trying to build a culture here, and especially for you seniors, you're only going to get, 1 to 2 years of this culture that's being built. But again, that term you used, we're laying the bricks in the foundation. I said, this team, you may not be the one that reaps the reward from it. And I referenced your 2006 team. I said, hey, I like to feel as though my team kind of turned that program around. My junior year, we were the first team to win double digit games in like 15 years. My sophomore and freshman year, we only won 4 games, and then we were over 500. We got gypped out of the LIT that year. But I said, this to the seniors, you may not be on the team that actually wins a state championship, but you can be the foundation piece to that. And a lot of people have to understand, it is a process. Very few programs win it in the first year in any sport when they put that team together. So that is ultimately a huge testament to being able to rebound from that. But it's why I said that there is that value in losing. And you're right, Dale, Buddy, Cedric, Shad, Thomas, you had some horses coming behind that next year. All right, so throughout your coaching career, we've talked about some of the different stops that you've been at, from Kentucky to Whitfield to you're now at Eastern. So you've been a couple different programs, and again, I feel like to reach 500 wins in 30 years, you've had success at all of them. Is there a lesson from each stop that you've learned from that you think shows up in the way you lead today?
Well, I'm especially appreciative and thankful of those early guys, the Whitfield, the Highview Baptist guys. I was 26 coaching them, and I know it was a culture shock for you, but imagine 3 years before that, coming straight from the college level and straight from Coach Pitino. So they allowed me to grow as a coach, and we had great success there. I think we won 46 games in 2 seasons, but I was probably only maybe 6 or 7 years older than the seniors on that first team, and they allowed me to grow, and so I'm so appreciative of that. Ballard gave me a look at obviously a higher level and a much more competitive environment. It gave me experience in dealing with different kinds of families and parents. J-Town was where I think the what we kind of just referenced, the building blocks, the foundation that you could point to tangibly and visibly and say, this led to this led to that led to that, and that's why we are what we were. And for probably after those first 3 years, for the next 8-9 years, I mean, we were top 10 in the state. And so it was I think the biggest thing I take from that was how I learned that the culture you reference, when you build a program the right way, there's a trickle down effect that your younger players, just like that group that won it, they got very limited playing time on the varsity because of who was in front of them. And today's culture, people they're not gonna stand for that. I should be playing varsity. I'm going to leave. I'm going to go here. I'm going to go there. But that group, they were taught how to do. We finally got to a point to where the players were helping set the tone and the standard and the culture, because the coaches had taught them, and it was now they were teaching each other. And I think when you get to that point, that's when you know that you've accomplished something. And then at Iroquois, I spent 13 years there, actually longer than I've coached anywhere. And often people would ask me, why are you still there? Why have you stayed at Iroquois so long? And I think the thing that my eyes were really open to there, we had some good teams at Iroquois. I mean, we overachieved, I think, in many years, but they may not have been at the talent level that those J-Town kids were or the Ballard kids were. But those kids deserved the same life lessons, the same coaching, the same culture, the same everything, just because they went to a school that maybe was not thought of as high of an athletic school or a basketball school. And, I have many, many fond memories of being there. And now, having been at Eastern for a year, I can't really put into words how enjoyable the past year has been. I'm teaching wise. I'm year 30. I don't have any plans to stop coaching anytime soon. But if this is my last stop, who knows? But if this is my last stop, I can't think of a better place to be. The school culture is just second to none, and we've got so many talented people in our building in all areas. This past season was one of the most enjoyable seasons that I've had as a coach. We had a tough ending, but every year you have a tough ending except 2006. So, but I am thoroughly excited about the future there, and really I'm just appreciative of the ability to compete again at the highest level.
I see the joy in you. It's as hard as it is for me to look here and see you in that blue instead of, one of these maroon shirts from the year 2000. But I see the joy in there. And again, I've seen you happy, and I know that you're in the right place for you. And I'm just wishing you all the success and everything. So, like you said, you've been able to coach at a couple different places. You even helped out. You've done the college thing. Early on in your career, and one of your really good friends is Billy Donovan. So I know he is currently an NBA coach. He's had a couple jobs there. So I know you have kind of been a part of his journey as well. So this is a question that. I also told all the kids that I work with at the high school, I'm going to ask everybody that I get in front of, because you've seen basketball at the highest of high levels. One thing we struggle with is effort, which I personally don't feel like a coach should ever have to coach effort. There's no drill. Again, it's as many drills as you come up with. There's no drill that you can come up with to teach a kid how to give effort. How would you compare what a practice is like at the high school level versus the college level versus the professional level? And what are some of the biggest differences? You mentioned the preparation, but like intensity and expectations during those sessions.
I think you may touched on it. Some of the high school programs, the practices consist of nothing more than pickup or open gym or scrimmaging, and that's not the way to run a program. And so I think that high school players are typically behind defensively than the next level up, college. I think most college coaches will talk about guys coming to them not being necessarily ready to play defensively. Even the more talented offensive players that can score may not quite be ready defensively. So as a high school coach, I feel like it's my job. You mentioned the preparation and kind of getting you ready, but you're not going to have a mid-major or a high-level college player on every team in high school. But if you have anybody in your program that can go on and play at the college level, in my opinion, it's our job to get you ready. So all the stuff you talked about, from scouting reports to, like, if you go to college and the first time you're seeing those things is college, you may be so overwhelmed that you're packing your bags and going home at Christmas, or you're like, I just can't do this. It's just not for me. So I think I like to feel like, and I am only able to do this again because of Rick Pitino and from spending 5 years with him, 6 years at Kentucky, observing it. Like I like to feel like the effort in my practice is the same type of effort that is expected at the college level. I think the instead of having a high school team may have three or four college players of varying levels on it, if you're lucky, and then you've got some guys that are, and there's nothing wrong with that, but you've got some guys that know that when their high school career's over, that's it. They're not going on anymore. So I think sometimes your terminology and the level, and it depends on the school you're at and the players you have, but sometimes you've got to dummy down some of the things that you're doing. In other words, you may have a team that just can't do some of the things that you as a coach might like to do. For example, you may not be able to consistently change defenses. and you may have to only be able to do that out of a timeout versus on the fly. You may have a team that is not efficient at guarding screens correctly, and so I think at the high school level, there's probably a lot more breaking down things and teaching things to where when you get to the college level, they expect you to kind of already know some of this stuff. Now they may call it downing a screen instead of icing a screen, but the terminology may have a different word, but nonetheless, they expect you when you get to that college level to maybe pick up at a more advanced stage. In other words, you at the high school level, we're probably going way back. Now at the pro level, I think they're in training camp at the beginning of the year. They're putting in a ton of stuff, but those practices are especially with them playing 82 games, are not nearly as tough. Not to say that they don't practice stuff, but they've got to protect their bodies and protect against injury. And so I think at the NBA level, it's more of a intellectual understanding. This is how we're doing this. This is how we're guarding this team. This is what they're going to do, and we'll walk through some stuff, do a lot of shooting. But I especially once the season gets rolling, I don't think that they're going to be going full throttle, in practice. So, but basketball is a universal language. And so whether you're at middle school, high school, college, pro, there are certain things that should be understood. Even if you're in say a guy goes to a foreign country and he doesn't speak a great language, there are certain things that the game of basketball that he should have been taught that are just basic to where even if I don't understand the words he's using, I understand what we should be doing together. So I think that the successful programs are able, if a guy's been in a successful program, he can go to another successful program. I'm talking like he goes to college and he can pick right up. If he's coming from a program where he wasn't taught or he wasn't challenged or he didn't get pushed, then he's probably going to struggle when he goes to a level up. And so, so there's differences across the board, but, I think the only thing that's probably changed for me in the way I run my practice is length. When you were playing, I'd have to go back. I have all the practice schedules saved in a box from year to year, but I'm guessing in the preseason we were probably practicing close to 3 hours.
Yeah.
And now in the preseason, I'm probably 2 hours and 15 minutes, if that. I just think, again, kids have changed, so I think over time I've learned in order to be the freshest at the end of the season, we got to kind of pull back in the beginning of the season some.
Yeah, no, and I really I see that. And when you say if you went from a successful program, you should be able to, it should be more of an easier transition for you. I definitely agree with that, and I'm living proof of that. I never had a walkthrough until I did it with you. I didn't even know what the concept was. But again, at the college level, we do a lot of walkthroughs, game days, and again, team meals, and a lot of that stuff was just an easy transition for me. At the beginning, I was mad that you were taking me away from the girls' basketball game to go to the back gym to do a 10, 15-minute walk through a place that, like you said, we spent 3 hours a day before working on. But again, it ultimately is that that preparation, and just the knowledge part of it to help you as you get to that next level. That if you're missing it here, they're not going to have time to teach it to you at the next level. And like you said, that those are those kids that pack up and they go home for Christmas break and don't come back. So, uh, now again, you've been coaching high school for 30 years, and I remember because when I first learned about your friendship with Billy Donovan, and I start seeing all the success that you're having, I'm like, it's just a matter of time. You're gonna go. And I know we kind of talked about this earlier. That you've managed to stay through the high school level because you've kind of felt more that you could contribute more there. Again, I think at any level that you would have gone to, you would have been a great contributor, and just a stud standout. And you know organizing and X and O's and changing stuff on the fly. But again, you said you've continued to build at the high school level. What challenges and passions still drive you to come back to coach every season?
Well, um, I think there's something to be said about longevity. I think um, if something is your passion, it's always going to be your passion. And you know, I've truly feel that way about coaching. I went 2 years ago, 3 years ago, because I still enjoyed coaching, but I really was kind of coming to that point in my mind trying to decide what how do I where do I go now? Do I keep doing this? Do I look? And so I went to over fall break. I went to New York and spent 3 days watching Coach Pitino at St. John's, watched him practice, and spent some time with him. And when he was at Louisville, I would periodically get down there and watch a practice. But when you're coaching your team, it's hard to get down there. So anyway, long story short, I sat there and watched him because I hadn't, he'd been gone from Louisville for, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years, and I had not really had a chance to do that. And so I wondered to myself as I went up there, like, has he changed? Is he still gonna, like, he's getting older? Is he still gonna coach the same way? And the thing that I took from watching him for 3 days was, was he as loud and boisterous as he was 30 years ago? No. He still had his moments where if he needed to do that, he could do that. But the precision and the attention to detail that you had come to know from him was as sharp as it has ever been. And I think that is 1,000% on display in what he's done, with St. John since he's taken over there. So I remember flying home thinking to myself, man, this guy is 70 and he's as good as he ever was. And so there's no reason that I should just because somebody says, well, you've been doing this for 30 years, it's time for you to give it up. If you don't want to give it up, don't give it up. And I really enjoy seeing kids succeed. And I've had, over the course of time, countless guys come back to you, whether it's a year later, 5 years later, 10 years later. Man, coach, I really appreciate this. You taught me this. It helped me do this. The lessons you taught me, I'm using now here. That, as a coach, is more satisfying than any championship or any victory because you feel like you've contributed to somebody else's success, not just as a basketball player, but as a person. And so, yeah, like I said earlier, I've really, really enjoyed this year at Eastern, and I'm very passionate and excited about continuing there. And the kids are such great kids. I even said a few times this year, man, some of y'all are just too nice. We've got to be a little bit meaner because they're just such nice kids. But it was really a pleasure coaching them, and I'm looking forward to the future there.
Yeah, and I know you've got some really good young kids too. I know we've talked about James and Aaron. You've got some young kids coming through that are going to be helping you. I know my dad even got out to a game this year, so I'm happy to see that you're still loving what you're doing because again, I think you're still changing lives. You're still out there doing it, and again, I think you're if not the best, one of the three best coaches to ever come through Kentucky high school basketball. So I appreciate
Appreciate that.
everything you've done.
Appreciate that.
So, all right, that was, so as we kind of go through this, we kind of, hit on the stories and all of the flashbacks. Now I want to hit you with a little rapid fire. We're going to give you a couple of kind of like one hitters, this or that's. You tell me, your first instinct. The only thing I say is, you just can't tell me both. I may ask you a question. You tell me kind of the first thing that comes to mind. All right.
All right.
All right. Again, you've been on the sideline for a lot of games. So last, coming down at the end of the wire, you want a timeout or you going to let them play?
95% of the time, I'm gonna let them play, and if I see that it's not working, then I may try to get a timeout late. But my experience tells me that when I have just let them go, the defense is struggling to catch up, and there's a lot of pressure on the defense. You call a timeout, they're going to be able to change defenses, adjust. So if I have to pick one, I'm going to say let them go.
Would you rather be up or down for the last play?
Wow. I think it depends on your team. Obviously, I think being up is the answer. But if you've got a team that you're not confident in defensive abilities, and you got to get that one stop, I don't know. That can be tough. But obviously, if you've got the lead, that means somebody else has got to do something to take it from you. So I'll say up.
All right. So, bonus question: 2000. You rather be up or down? You got me. Would you rather be up or down? Defense wasn't my strong suit for anybody listening.
Well, if we were down, I would have felt very confident that you could score, get us a bucket. And over the years, you've had those guys that are bucket getters, like they can create their own shot and get a bucket. If you're coaching a team that doesn't have a guy that can get his own, now you can't do that over just consistently over 32 minutes. But if you need a end of the game, you got a guy that can do that. I would have been confident in that. So if I'm thinking back, I'm in my mind, I'm going back and thinking of who else was on that team. I don't know that first bunch was great defensively. So as a unit, if I recall, it seems like we had to play a lot of zone at the end.
We did.
And that's, you got to do what you got to do. But if that's not my preference, so I'd probably say be up with that team.
All right, 2006. You got Rashad, Buddy, and Cedric, but you also got Thomas in the paint.
Again, if you're up, they got to beat you. But having said that, Rashad was one of the best on the ball defenders that I have ever coached, and Thomas is unequivocally the best shot blocker that I have ever coached. We discussed that last night. He just had an innate inherent. It was just natural. Like, you can't teach blocking shots the way that he did. So, again, if you're up, they got to beat you. But I would be confident in that group getting a stop.
Yeah, I think Cedric was an animal. Buddy was all over the place. So I would agree with you. And I've said this, and I'm gonna go on record and say it now. I know a lot of people like to see some of the things that I did at J-Town, but I told Rashad Basie, I think Rashad Basie was a better basketball player than me. And I'm going to put it on record right here. So, and I'm going to send this, I'm going to clip it and I'm going to send it to him too, so that he knows that I stand by what I said. All right. So developing players or winning games?
Developing players, because if you do that, you're going to win games. Yeah. And you're not going to win games if you don't develop players.
Very true. Would you rather coach talent or work ethic?
Hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. So, now obviously you've got to have some talent or you're not going to be successful. But if you've got, I would rather have an above average player, not an elite player that works his tail off, versus a ultra talented elite player that doesn't work hard.
Yes, I agree with that. All right. Because again, you were the first person that ever really got me into watching film. So do you find that you learn more watching film on your team or your opponents?
I think it goes back to the preparation point that I mentioned at the very beginning. And because that's ingrained in me, with this new invention of huddle cameras in your gym, back when you played, if we were going to film practice, we had to get somebody to set up. Then we had to find somebody that was reliable to make sure they're not going to be, pointing at the ceiling. So now you just have the ability to hit a button and you can record practice. So that's been very, very beneficial, and I have enjoyed that since the invention of huddle cameras in gyms. But I think during the season I spend so much time studying our opponent that for me, I tend to learn more on our opponents from film.
Yeah. Any chance you have any of those old tapes you used to send up Charlie up to film at the top row of the bleachers from 2000? I would love to see some of them.
You know, I have some tapes from the '06 team. I don't
Mhm.
know. At one time, I had a bunch in my garage, but I don't know what years. Actually, J-Town asked me if I had any that I could share with them several years ago, and I gave them some. I remember giving them some DVDs, but yours wouldn't have been on DVD. Yours would have been on VHS. So even if they were found, they probably I don't know if they've made stood the test of time or not.
I will tell you, I don't know if you remember, my parents hired a couple of girls to record all of my games my senior year. And a year and a half ago, I was able to I still had all of them, just about all of them. I was able to digitize them and I put them all on a flash drive. So I've got a lot of our games together. All right. Again, like I said, you prepared me for my college level more than I could ever have imagined. How many plays are in your playbook?
I think it
Because we
varies
got a
year to
lot.
year. Year to year, it varies. Um, when I feel like I've got a team, I mean, unlimited numbers of what you could go to. But on a given year, if I feel like I've got a team that absorb things well and can do things, I mean, we may have, you know, 15 to 20 man sets, 5 to 10 zone sets, and another 10 or so out of bounds sets. And then you throw in your special situations and press offenses and things like that. But I would say for a general average, I'd say 30 plus. But the thing is, you get into a season and you realize we can't. They're not going to be able to do all this. So I think that changes year to year. But like when we get to next year, I'll take this year's play sheet. And early in the preseason, we'll start looking at it and deciding. And as we go through the preseason, I'll be adding stuff to it and crossing stuff out. Now, that's not going to work with this bunch or whatever. So, but I think you get to a point where and again, kids when they play AAU, they're not running a whole lot of stuff. So if you're trying now, they come back to you and you're trying to get them to run all these different things. Some of them just are not going to be able to do it, and it's simply because of the way they have come up and been playing AAU since first or second grade, and so I think you have to take that on a case by case, year by year.
Yeah, and I think that's what you say. I think is spot on because we get a lot of kids who just not only did is there just a complete lack of interest in running plays, but they can't. They don't understand some of the concepts because, like I said, because of AAU, they're just going out doing what everybody just calls playing basketball. Whereas at that next level, as you get to college and as you get to pros, you're going to run plays. I tell kids we had 100 plays when I was at Butler. And you're expected to know that within the first month.
Right, and if you can't run a play unless you are elite, you are not going to play at the next level. You're going to sit there until you can figure out how to run a play.
Yeah. And I would tell you the funniest thing I see is you put in a play and you run that for about 10 to 15 minutes and then you ask them to flip it and they have no idea what to do on the other side of the floor. So,
Correct. Correct. 100%. Yeah,
is
it's
yeah,
it's amazing that but again, it's not something that I think it's like anything. Being a parent when you're teaching kids lessons when they're young, if they don't learn these things, when they first start playing. Now, obviously, I'm not talking about age 5 or 6 when they can't even get it to the rim. But when they get to a point to where they kind of understand what's going on, if you're not starting to lay the foundation, by the time they get to high school, it's too late. Like
yeah.
some of them are just never going to catch up. So I think that's where we do kids disservice, especially the talented ones, because they've been told all the way coming up how good they are. They put up all these numbers in AAU. Well, what are you going to do when a team scouts you and understands your weaknesses and forces you to use your weak hand or double teams you or forces you to give it up? Now, if you can't run a play, you're stuck. So
Yeah. And I give you all the credit for the district championship. Again, the one we got this shirt for, the district championship for you that week in practice, you put a triangle and two in for us to run against PD Brown. And literally, he actually messaged me within the last 2 years, still talking about that, and that he still hates it. So, um, and like I said, I've digitized probably 90% of the games from my senior year. Is there one game from our time together that you still remember today?
Uh, well, the game you just referenced, I mean, remember the district championship. Um, I seem to recall. I mean, there's several games that jump out at me. Obviously, been a long time. I think I recall a game right around Christmas break where we were playing, I believe, North Bullitt, a team that we were superior to and probably should have won comfortably. And I think I recall us struggling immensely and not being ready to play. I don't know if we had looking ahead to Christmas or whatever, but I remember I went deep on the bench, and I don't remember the reason. I don't know if it was foul trouble, injury, or just being mad at somebody. But it seems like I put somebody in that hardly ever played, and they got a big rebound for us. Maybe I'm confusing things together, but I seem to remember that. Um, but obviously, the district championship jumps out, and then that first round of the regional tournament also jumps out. Because correct me if I'm wrong, but when we won that game, that would have been the furthest that you guys had been up to that point. Is that correct or not?
We never made it out of district. We lost
Okay.
first round of district every year.
Okay.
Now, if I remember correctly, we beat Eastern in that game. Just I don't know if you remember that. We beat Eastern that game.
I didn't remember it being Eastern. No.
Yeah, we
Okay.
had a home game against Eastern. Um, but you mentioned the North Bullet game. I take that back. I remember that game. I actually set the school record. Thomas broke it, but for most rebounds in the game, I had 22. But something happened with the schedule, and we played them on a Saturday morning, early in the morning during Christmas break. So I blame that, not anything else. Why
Okay.
that game was the way it was.
Okay.
So, all righty. So again, like I said, I wanted to just kind of get you with just kind of take you back down memory lane, hit you with some quick ones, kind of get your thoughts and everything on. So again, I appreciate you doing that. Again, as I told you, a lot of this that I'm doing, this project I'm working on is not possible without my sponsors. This episode of Beyond the Game More Stories is brought to you by RJM Customs. RJM Customs is a creative company that specializes in turning ideas into realities, from 3D printing and custom signs to apparel, decals, and handcrafted wood pieces. They bring a level of detail, passion, and craftsmanship that truly sets them apart. Whether you're a team looking for some custom gear, a business building your brand, or someone with a vision you want brought to life, RJM Customs works with you every step of the way to make it happen. At RJM Customs, it's simple. Your imagination is their blueprint. We're proud to partner with the brand that values creativity, quality, and helping people bring their ideas to life. So be sure to check them out online at www.rjmcustoms.com and see what they can create for you. All right, Coach. So again, I appreciate you. So as we wrap up the episode, again, I just want to take the time and publicly just thank you for everything that you've done for the game of basketball, for the city of Louisville, high school basketball, and just all the kids that lives that you've touched. Without you, a lot of us wouldn't have been able to do the things that we did. And again, because of basketball, it's helped me change my life, my family's lives, and everything like that. So, truly, truly appreciate everything. I can never say thank you enough. Again, I apologize for being the immature kid that I was at 17, 18. But again, I think, if we'd have had more time together, I think we could have done something really, really special. But again, I still do value the time that we had. So, and again, I appreciate you coming on here, taking the time, just the openness, the perspective, telling me the story about how you got the nickname Magic. So I really appreciate that. I'll let one of your other coaches know that I did ask that because he told me I definitely need to ask that. So before we close things out here, I just want to give you the opportunity, to let everybody know, about, anything you got going on. I know the Eagles have an Instagram page. I highly recommend you guys go out there and follow them. They got the season coming up, summer ball. It's going to be a good season for them. But anything you want to just share with the audience, if you got summer league games coming up or projects you're working on, I just want you to take the time to do that.
Sure. Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity to be on here. I appreciate everything you said. I agree with you. Some of these seniors that I inherited this year at Eastern, I said the exact same thing to them. I wish we'd had more than 1 year together, and certainly that holds true for you as well. If people in Louisville are watching this and they see it, we do have a summer basketball camp for grades 2 through 8. Kids that'll next school year will be going into grades 2 through 8, and there will be information on our team Instagram page as well as our team Twitter page, Eastern HSBB. But you can find us on there, and certainly if you're in the Louisville area, we'd love to have you come to camp. We will be playing summer league in the month of June, and those schedules aren't out yet, but certainly anybody's welcome to come out and see us. I think at Eastern we're also going to host the Kentucky Senior All-Stars versus the Junior All-Stars in I believe it's May 30th. It's a Saturday, and Eastern has kind of been doing that for the last few years, so we'll be hosting that, and that's always a good time. You can see the best seniors in the state from this past season, and then you can see what's projected to be the best seniors in the state for next season. So that's always a good time. So if you're in Kentucky and Louisville, and certainly love to have you come out.
Yeah, definitely. And if you send me the camp information, we'll promote it as well. So, but again, I appreciate you, Coach. I wish you all the best of luck. I'm always supporting. I'm always watching from a distance. Like I said, I'm getting over my fear of heights. I'm going to fly up there this summer. If you guys have, I would love to have you, at least one of your coaches, at least work out my kids, just so that I can be like, you worked out both generations and trained them. So I appreciate that. We'll be there in the summer. But, again, so for everybody listening, I appreciate you taking the time to come out and just spend a little bit of time with us, hearing some stories from our past and just kind of how these sports have taught us life lessons. So if the conversation touched you, please like and subscribe. We're everywhere you get content. Anywhere they're delivering content, we're there. We're on Amazon, we're on Spotify, we're on Apple, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. We're everywhere that you are. So give us a like and a follow. Or if something you heard today you feel like would touch somebody, we ask that you share this with them. Or if you just know somebody that likes sports or storytelling, we ask you share it with them as well, because that's how we grow this platform. And for any more information about us, again, Coach Morrow gave you their Instagram, but you can also visit www.btgms.com. That's our website. We got plenty of content on there. We got all our official merchandise. We have more coming as well. So again, I'm your host, Dwayne Lightfoot Jr. Coach Jeff Morrow, I appreciate you for doing this. I appreciate you for everything you taught me and helped me with. And so for everybody out there, these sports are teaching us life lessons we're going to carry with us long beyond the game. So even though the games may end, these lessons last a lifetime. So until the next time, we'll see you beyond the game.
Thanks.